Hello, welcome. Fatih Birol, Executive Director of International Energy Agency. Founding Chair, Sabancı University Board of Trustees, Güler Sabancı, she'll be joining us online. And very distinguished panelists and speakers of the IICEC conference, my dear colleagues, distinguished members of the press, and all dear guests, welcome. Sabancı University Istanbul International Center for Energy and Climate, IICEC, each and every year having conferences, which is actually followed by interest. And as actually Senem Ilgaz, as a journalist and also a reporter, also on TV, following everything so closely, thinking about the global outlook and the Russian-Ukrainian war, this year's conference will be followed with much more attention. Actually, the title of the conference is Global Energy Crisis, Solutions and the Role of Renewable Energy. Well, we will have very distinguished speakers soon. And at the same time, Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook 2022 report launch presentation will also be held here. At the same time, please follow the conference from LinkedIn, Twitter, social media accounts. We have hashtags, you can see, with all the hashtags, as you can see on the screen. You can possibly actually share your posts. Now, first of all, Doğan Mehmet Üçol will be having the opening address, and I would like to invite him to the floor. Mehmet Doğan Üçol, please, coordinator of Sabancı University IICEC. Executive Director of International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, Founding Chair, Sabancı University Board of Trustees, Güler Sabancı, and very distinguished stakeholders of the energy and the climate world, very distinguished participants and members of the press and the media. I would like to extend my gratitude to all of you. We have the title of Global Energy Crisis, Solutions and the Role of Renewable Energy. Welcome to our traditional year-end 14th conference. Actually, with the Northern Star vision that we have as IICEC, we organize several events, and in the field of energy and climate, we continue to work as a hub. At the global level, the world, both economically and geopolitically, suffering from several energy crises in this period of time that we are going through. In the recent months, the Director of International Energy Agency declared that it is for the first time ever that the world is going through a real and actual energy crisis. We have a high-level panel, and we will actually have the chance to discuss solutions for several problems. The crisis, the global energy crisis, is it going to be possible to turn it into an opportunity? Renewable energy, developing technologies, could they offer a solution for this crisis? What type of a roadmap we should follow in energy transformation, crisis, and it is linked to climate change, how we are going to shape the solutions. And at the same time, as you all know, is it getting much more difficult to reach to the targets that we have? All these questions and different perspectives will be discussed. In October 14, from MIT, Dennis White discussed about fusion energy and accelerating energy. And in June 23, we have the 13th IICEC conference, and the energy security and clean energy and financing. It attracted a lot of attention, and now this is our traditional year-end conference. In the previous years, we also had several forums, the Road Energy Outlook Lounge, different workshops, seminars, webinars, and the distinguished Güler Sabancı defined as a triangle of success. And this is the actually 41st high-level event that we have from the public, from the private industry, and from think tanks, universities, the diplomats that we have. Also with some actually great interest from the press and the media. Thank you very much. Looking at today's agenda, we will have opening speech by Güler Sabancı, founding chair, Sabancı University Board of Trustees. Then will be followed by a keynote speech, Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director, International Energy Agency. Then Bora Şekip Güray, Director of IICEC, will have Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook 2022 report launch presentation, and we will have a high energy panel. Kıvanç Zaimler, Energy Group President, Sabancı Holding, Sinan Ak, CEO Zorlu Energy, and Enis Amasyalı, General Manager, Bursa, ENBW Energy, and Semra Kuran from ING Turkey, and Hakan Yıldırım and Sanko Energy Group will be joining us in the panel. And of course, at the same time, members of the IICEC board, thank you very much. IGL, Toyota, Bursa, and BP Türkiye Enerjisa, Eren Holding, ING Turkey, Sanko Energy, Shell, Sokar, and Zorlu Energy. And of course, you, our very distinguished participants, once again, thank you. And I wish for the success of this conference with my deepest regards to all of you. Thank you very much, Mehmet Doğan Üçok. Now we will move to the opening speech by Güler Sabancı, founding chair, Sabancı University Board of Trustees. Distinguished Sabancı will be joining us online this year, and she will be on the screen soon. Hello. Good morning. Yes, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, Dr. Fatih Birol, very distinguished stakeholders of the energy and the climate world, very distinguished participants, Istanbul International Center for Energy and Climate, we'll be speaking about very critical developments and the updates on the energy world. We have very distinguished speakers from the industry. This is a very important event, and I would like to invite you all for being in here. Due to my illness, I actually cannot join in person, but initially I just wanted to address to you online. Well, soon we will listen to a keynote speech by Mr. Birol and the recent developments, and at the same time horizon opening discussions will be made. I'm also looking forward to listen to him. As you all know, the President of the United States, Biden, to Macron, France President, to Fatih Birol, especially as you all know, always actually consulting him on a regular basis about his perspective on climate energy. This is the same for us. We at the same time have Fatih Birol always here as the Honorary President of IICEC. Our deepest gratitude to you. With his leadership, the International Energy Agency actually turned into an organization as a leader in the field of climate and energy, thanks to him. And also, as the Honorary President of IICEC is attending the event, as I told you, we're actually more than happy and, of course, so proud to have him here. For the vision of IICEC, he contributed a lot. Once again, thank you very much for all your support. Our very distinguished speakers at the same time will touch upon several issues from the perspective of a financier, as the investors, and once again, I would like to thank each and every one of them one by one. You have great contribution. And dear participants, there is the success of triangle. Is a part, IICEC is a part of this triangle. All the stakeholders are coming together to have a common mind. There is actually absolute need for a common mind in the world. Within ecosystem of IICEC, all the works, and we actually continue to extend our works, which I am actually so pleased to follow all these developments. Within the framework of the series of Outlook, this time once again, one of the important area of opportunity for Turkey, IICEC focus on renewable energy. We will soon listen to an analytical perspective to renewable energy by Bora Şekip Güray, and together with the stakeholders of the industry, we actually have a participatory approach. There are several critical points of the report, and we will listen to that from Bora Şekip Güray. But before that, I actually would like to thank all the players of the industry, all the stakeholders who contributed to this report, and at the same time the university, and to all our participants, and at the same time, of course, the IICEC team who actually shaped this report. That's actually a great book, a great catalog, and I'm sure that you all will have access to this report today. And from now on, as IICEC, the Turkish energy and climate policies will at the same time be discussed by the IICEC, and will continue to at the same time shape the future of our policies. It's very important to focus on science and to create value from the stakeholders. As Sabancı University, we really gave utmost importance to it. That's the perspective IICEC has, and it's actually a pioneer center. And in concluding my words, at the same time, I would like to thank to the members of the board of IICEC who are supporting IICEC. Once again, I would like to, and AI Toyota, Borusan EMBV, Enerjisa, Eren Holding, Sanko Energy, Shell, Sokar, Zorlu Energy, and at the same time who joined us last month, ING Turkey and BP. Actually, I'm saying they are actually our companions. Once again, I would like to thank them all. To extend activities of IICEC and to bring more depth into the activities, they're always providing us support. And it's very important to have a sustainable future. And for the sake of a sustainable future, and I'm sure that it's going to be shaping our roadmap and will be a very productive event. Once again, I would like to thank to all the attendees, and we are getting ready for the 100th anniversary of our republic. And I wish for the best from the new year. Both will bring health and peace to all of us. Thank you very much.
Sabancı. Thank you, Mrs. Güler Sabancı, for your opening speech. Now, I think when it comes to climate change, there is no doubt that the role of renewables have become the pupil of the eye for the future energy resources. Actually, very brief time ago, the Global Energy Outlook report of the International Energy Agency has already shown that this is true. Dr. Fatih Birol, when reviewing the report, stated that the next 5 years we would expect an incredible amount of change for the renewable energy. Well, what will be the hints to consider when we are replaying the game? And the crisis we are going through, what kind of a crisis is that? And what would be our prediction for the future? To find answers to these questions, I would like to invite to the floor Dr. Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of International Energy Agency and Honorary President of IICEC. In the meanwhile, as Dr. Birol approaches the rostrum, I have to say that he will be available for the questions that you might have after his presentation, and we will have people to pass over to you the microphone. Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, distinguished colleagues, my friends. I would like to extend my regards to each and every one of you. I don't know if Mrs. Sabancı is still with us online. If so, I would like to say that we do hope her a quick recovery, and hopefully she will get better soon. In today's talk, I will be concentrating on the energy crisis that we've been going through globally. Let me first start by saying that February the 24th, is the date when Russia invaded Ukraine. And about a week later, on March the 1st, all the global press has been announced by our side that the world is on the verge of an energy crisis never ever precedented before. And we made that appear on the media as the first energy crisis in the world. Back in 1970s, you would remember we had some oil crises and we had to go through those crises, but this one is quite unique in the way that its depth is different and its complexity. Therefore, I have to say that it's quite unique in the way that it's presented. And the reason, simple reason for that is the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. And Russia has become the number one, until 24th of February, was the number one exporter of energy. I mean, if this kind of a country attempts something like that, the steps that they are going to take and the counter steps, of course, in the rest of the world, as you would guess, would lead to the first energy crisis. In the previous years, we had, changes or fluctuations only in the oil sector. But now, as you look at the prices, you would see that not only oil, but also natural gas and electricity prices tended to skyrocket, almost everywhere in the world, which had implications, no doubt, in economy as well as in social balances and political developments in the rest of the world. The latter I'm not going to discuss for the purposes of the presentation today. Almost all countries of the world had to experience record level inflation rates that have not been experienced at least in the last 4 decades. So all of these indicators show us that we are going through a very serious energy crisis. I'm sure that most of you are following. Many countries of the world, including the EU, are facing the threat of getting in recession. It was the day before yesterday that arrived, but many of my friends that I talked to agreed me, saying that I'm thanking God that 2022 is left behind, because 22 has been the most incredible year. But I'm afraid to say, as a realistic person, that the next year, 2023, will be even worse. Well, my dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we made, as you know, the Global Energy Outlook report, which can be downloaded free of charge online from our website, and our publications are now being broadcasted online, free of charge. My colleagues who have contributed in making the report were asked to answer 2 questions. The first one was, do you think, and would it be likely to have impacts of the current crisis on developing or developed countries of the world, including the EU and Russia? What would be the implications of the current crisis on every country? The second question was, how about the predicted role of clean energy and transition to other renewables? Will this process slow down or accelerate this transition? And these questions we've posed in the report and in this talk as well. I will be concentrating on these questions. Number 1, how the countries are affected. What are the expected implications? There is no place that remains unaffected, but there are 3 regions indeed I would like to concentrate upon. The first one is developing countries their voices, although are not heard very much. The second group is Europe, our most important trading partner, and 3, Russia. Well, for developing countries, if you would ask me, currently we are going through an energy crisis, but the #1 victim of the world in the future energy crisis will be the economies of these countries, unfortunately. 2 indicators I can show you. This first one is especially speaking for Africa. You know, you might know it if you're following our work, but for the last 20 years, we do look into and measure the number of people who do not have access to electricity in Africa, Latin America, Asia. We do measure that every year. In the last, 2 years, although we had a decline in this, percentages for the last 10, 20 years, we were seeing that less people lacked access to electricity. But for the first time, this year in 2022 tended to increase. So we understand that versus 2021, more people lacked access to electricity, particularly in African countries, because the financial strength and the capacity of people declined tremendously. The second important indicator for energy, particularly for developing countries, is for the economies of energy importing developing countries. I do see that many countries are in the verge of getting into the vortex of international borrowing. You would remember back in 1980s, this foreign borrowing or international borrowing issue has been quite troublesome for many countries in the world. Leading to major economic downturn in the years that followed. But particularly in Africa and Latin America and Asia, there are some countries who are in the verge of, or who has already almost entered into the vortex of international borrowing. This is the first group of countries that will be implicated. I think these are the countries that will have the worst and the most significant effect experienced within this process, within the process of war, although they have not been physically involved. The second region is the European region, and I've mentioned that to many European leaders. When the crisis is expected to end or to almost come to an end, I think the engines of Europe, the big European countries, will have to sit around the table and discuss their energy policies as well as international policies, answering the question why we had based most of our energy on a single country for decades. Why we have become so much dependent on a single country for our energy supplies. I have to say that several times we have uttered this need to diversify the energy resources. In other words, wherever you're buying your energy resources, country A or B, it is really inevitable to diversify your energy resources, because it's quite high risk to be so much dependent on a single country. Every 5 years, we are running some energy outlooks for European governments, and we have advised this to many of the big European countries in the conclusion or the recommendations parts of the report. You need to diversify your energy imports and should not be that much dependent on a single country. Now, Europe has to go through this punishment, and they have to live through this burden of not being supplied natural gas and oil from Russia. So they found themselves in the need for, compensating for that from other countries, which is not an easy job, because tens of years you were dependent to one country and to these two energy resources, from house heating to industrial utilization. And I'm afraid to say that Europe will have to suffer. If there is no major surprise, this big crisis this winter, economically speaking, they would be somehow bruised, and they will be overcoming it eventually, but they will have to go through some suffering. And right after the war, there will be the need for an action plan, which we presented to European countries, what can be done on which themes to overcome the problems of this period. Many of them are about renewable energy, energy efficiency, and even the nuclear energy, particularly to Belgium and Germany. We have recommended to postpone the decisions of decommissioning nuclear energy power plants, which they have agreed with us so far. So if there is no big surprise, like geopolitical surprise, or if winter does not go on as cold as expected in Europe, Europe now seems to be able to overcome the winter conditions this year. But I think the biggest problem for Europe will be in 2023 and 24. Maybe we can address to that during the Q&A part of the session. Well, speaking for Europe, another bad news would be that the backbone of European economy is the industry, and particularly energy-intensive industry sector is going through major issues, because all of a sudden energy costs increased to trigger their total manufacturing costs raise, and versus many economies, their competitiveness weakened. And for the years to come, we do expect, if no precautions are taken, of course, we would expect major industrial sectors or sectoral branches in Europe to go through a downturn, which eventually, and I need to note that quite frankly, which eventually will have implications on employment, since the employment is basically provided by industry in Europe. So as I pointed out in my opening part, there might be some social implications as well. So this is how it looks for Europe. And from the current perspective, it seems quite challenging, and there will be a more challenging 2023 ahead of us. Europe will have to go through several problems in the near future, but one thing to note here is that the European Union and the countries of Europe, albeit different conditions, are quite prepared, and they have made very wise decisions. And we have been working with Mr. von der Leyen in many aspects together as the agency, and they have been, I have to say, quite courageous, and unique steps have been taken, at least to save the day for this winter. So this is how it looks for Europe. And the third region that I will have to dwell upon is Russia. Let's take a look at Russia, how they are expected to do in the near future. Well, Russia has been one of the milestones and cornerstones, at least have been so, for the global energy sector. And as I keep saying, until the 24th of February, they were the biggest energy exporter. Of course, after 24th of February, there have been ups and downs, but for Europe, at least, and as I've covered, Russia is a key country. But I mean, needless to say, Europe has been a unique region for Russia as well. Has been quite important. Let me give you two figures, and we know that in Russian economy, the money from energy exports have been critical. That has been a huge share in the pie. Two figures to give you. I mean, up until February the 24th, or maybe before the war, Russia's total oil exports were by 55% to Europe. And within the total natural gas exports, it was 65% of share for Europe, almost 1/3 of their exports of natural gas destined to Europe. Used to be. But now I have to say that Europe has always been a very good customer, never problematic, always pays on time and does not get into geopolitics, and has been a wonderful, a very civilized way of trading relationship in both ways. But now Russia has lost the biggest customer by far on a single day. Just imagine a big company, and you know, the first has the biggest share and the second and the first has a big gap in between that. All of a sudden the first customer evaporates. Well, this is not something that can be easily compensated with others, because let me start with natural gas, which is also critical for Turkey. Well, imagine natural gas in Russia. The natural gas exports is majorly from Western Siberia, and there are pipelines connected to Europe. This is how natural gas used to flow. Well, in of course, Russia will be in the search of new markets, but the gas that is intended for Europe to be redirected, say, to Asia will take at least 10 years. Because, you know, we don't know, also this is another question, whether there's the appetite for that in Asia. Even if they would ask for that kind of, natural gas from Russia, it would take minimum 10 years to build pipelines to Asia. Oil is less demanding, although there are some logistic problems for oil. One I have to name: normally an oil tanker will be arriving to the ports of Russia and Europe in 5-6 days, and the same tanker to arrive in bigger, consumers in Asia will take 57 days. So just as a comparison, I would like to say this. So to find new markets to compensate for Europe will not happen overnight, not even the night after. It might be quite a big problem there, and we'll have to suffer a major revenue loss there. But maybe more importantly, Russia has natural gas and oil fields, which I don't want to get into details for the purposes of the presentation, but geologically speaking, they are, challenging fields. And to extract natural gas and oil from these fields will take sophisticated technologies, which have been provided so far by the Western companies, which declined from Russia already, or declining from Russia, which I think will cause a major interruption in production as well. So to wrap up for Russia, merely for energy, Russia will be another region that will have to suffer after February the 24th. In energy. So up until that date, Russia has been a key player But this role has already changed and is expected to change even further in the days and weeks and months to come. Well, these three regions I have covered around the globe, once again, developing countries, EU and Russia, each will have to suffer different levels of problems from this global energy crisis. So I'm not speaking about good news to any of these regions, unfortunately, as a result of this energy crisis. Well, the first question has been answered by these answers, basically. The second question, to repeat again, is, this misery that is created by the crisis, do we expect any increase or decrease in the demand for clean energy resources? So will the transition be accelerated or will be slowed down? And this transition, as we know, is already underway, but it's been just going with ups and downs. But how about the implications for the renewable energy sector? From where we look, we understand that the current energy crisis is going to accelerate the transition, accelerate considerably to the clean energy resources. So let me try and explain you why I think that way. Number one, there are many countries in the world that are calling for emergency programs, both financially and legally. They want to call for a quicker way of applying clean energy resources in their particular countries. Let me start with renewables. As will be discussed in the panel, and you will hear that there is an incredible development for renewables in all over the world. Just one brief figure for you as to how important it is. Looking at the next 5 years, and we do scrutinize the projects being run in different countries of the world, and I'm basing my assumptions on these projections. In the 5 years to come, the capacity of renewable energy in the world will increase by 2,400 gigawatts. To make it easier to understand, this increase will be equal to the increase achieved in the last 20 years, in the last 2 decades in the world. So whatever we have done in the last 2 decades, we will do it in the next 4 years, particularly solar, wind, onshore, offshore, will be in a tremendous increase in the world. And Europe will be the heart of this, as you know, as has always been. Why has this happened? Basically, the licensing processes and the permit procedures have already been facilitated and shortened quite swiftly with the instruction of the governments, or I don't know, whatever, maybe for other dynamics, but now it is getting to be a quicker process for licensing and permits. And all over the world, we can say that this is basically for this reason. This is for renewables. And turning to energy efficiency that we keep discussing about, how we can use energy more efficiently, because every year we look into the efficiency of the energy being spent in the world. And this year, the increase in energy efficiency have been twice as much as the previous years. So this has been incredible as an increase, particularly for buildings. And the reason for that, again, is the decisiveness and, of course, support, maybe incentives of the governments, from heat pumps to insulation. Governments have been quite keen in taking steps in this direction as a reaction, of course, again, to this crisis. And the third aspect is EVs, electrical cars. Again, another figure for you. In 2019, only 3 years ago, basically, out of the cars sold in the world, 4 out of 100 cars sold were electrical cars. But this year, in 2022, only in 3 years' time, this has been, out of every 10 cars being sold, almost 15 were EVs. And according to our forecast that has been scrutinized by the agency, as of tomorrow, I mean next year, 2023, and speaking of the biggest markets in the world, American market, China and Europe, expected to have 1 out of every 2 cars sold in these regions will be EVs. And the mere reason for that, although there are several reasons, but it's again the subsidies of the governments, as well as the fact that every major car manufacturer in the world has put their EVs on number 1, although not basically EVs, but hybrid or hydrogen. So there is a really big transformation in the transportation sector, which again is another very good indicator of the acceleration in clean energy. One more thing that I should note, which is the nuclear. Every year, there is an international meeting held in France, the Global Nuclear Conference, and it was in November this year. And during the opening remarks, I emphasized, and before the invasion, by the way, we used to see the appetite raising in some countries. And during my opening remark in the conference, I said that there is a chance of going back to nuclear. And I've revised it just several months ago, and I now say that there is a very apparent, very fast comeback to nuclear in the world, starting from Europe. Basically, Holland's government decided to install 2 new nuclear power plants, and then UK and France, they're getting in a new track, and they're opening a new chapter in their nuclear history. And many other countries, including ours, we have been inclined more to nuclear now. In the States, in the United States and in Canada, they have taken some decisions to prolong the life of the existing nuclear power plants and to build new ones. In Japan, after Fukushima, they decommissioned some of the power plants. Now they have recommissioned the old ones and now have taken steps to build new ones. And Korea the same, China already into nuclear business, leading the market, followed by India. So all over the world, there is a significant raise in the appetite for nuclear. Everywhere in the globe, which I think really is a remarkable development. It's both in the way of existing classical nuclear power plants and in smaller modular reactor way of nuclear power plants, which are smaller version of the classical nuclear power plants, like in 1/8 or 1/10 of the classical way that we're accustomed to. These are cheaper to build, more flexible to use, and new technologies are now being discussed in the market as well, which is the 4th indicator. Renewables, I've already covered EVs, energy efficiency, and nuclear. All the 4 will be the driving forces of governments to react against the current energy crisis. All on the table, all being discussed by the different governments of the globe, all different options available. And I keep saying clean energy, but essentially the driving force behind these decisions is not climate change. Well, for many years we keep discussing about climate change, environmentally friendly options. Yes, maybe environment is one factor, but the essential factor is energy security. because today the basic driving force behind the growth of renewable energy is, number one, energy security. This sudden, the leap forward in Europe and in India, merely because of energy security. So there are emergency plans being run and supported by the government. Also, the financial institutions are supporting these schemes as well. If you would ask me, maybe more importantly, and not being recognized by many besides Europe and United States, is the expected structural changes in industry. I can explain this as follows. In the United States of America, a very important law was passed this year, Inflation Reduction Act. I don't know how they or why this way they are naming it, but 400 billion US dollars worth of an investment they want to make in clean energy resources, and they also bring along incredible tax exemptions. What are these? Battery technologies, solar, wind, hydrogen, nuclear, incredibly supported to become profitable business in the United States. And the main reason for that is, of course, these are all clean technologies, yes, environmentally friendly, but the main reason is not climate change, but it boils down to making the American industry ready to be a leading power in manufacturing of these technologies. And the same track is being followed by Europe. And now they are prioritizing battery technologies, EVs, hydrogen, as well as nuclear, wind, solar. I mean, they want to be competitive. They just not want to be a buyer only, or a demander, but at the same time they want to be a supplier for these technologies. Japan, Kishida, the Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida, is quite proud, rightfully proud, of this brand new industrial arm, mainly under the title of Green Transformation of Japan, including many chapters from battery technologies to nuclear in a range. So they want to transform their local industry according to the manufacturing of clean energy technologies and to become competitive there. We know China has been after that for many years and have become the leader of that, both in EVs and solar panels. But India, quite interestingly, because they have not been so much heard there, but in producing solar panels, India have made incredible subsidies for that business. Of course, that is mostly to reduce their dependency to their big neighbor. So, as a matter of fact, the major economies of the world have been prioritizing and focusing on clean energy industries merely to be quite competitive in this domain. Through governments, of course, and through the direction of the governments, there has already been a big competition launched. What will this competition or this big race contribute to? Hopefully it's going to be a healthy and sound competition, but with this competition going on, the cost of clean energy technologies will come down, so which is good news for all of us. To wrap up, within the current global energy crisis, the reaction of the governments to this crisis have been in both, in two ways, short-term and structural. And both of these reactions, as we would predict, will pave the way for clean and reliable energy technologies and will accelerate the transition to these technologies merely for three reasons. Number one, energy security. Number two, industrial policies. Number three, climate change related causes. One final remark before the questions. I have to note that, as I've indicated at the outset, 2022 has been quite a challenging year, painful for many people, particularly for those people in Ukraine that had to go through some displacement, but also for the rest of the world, has been quite painful, and for the energy sector has been quite a complex year. But I would guess and predict that by 2030, when we turn back to these days, 2022 will not be remembered only as a challenging and a painful year, but at the same time will be the historical word and acceleration of clean energy technologies. Thank you. And if any questions are there, I may be available to them. Well, I will get to questions if you allow me. I will collect the questions in a group of three because there is a really important panel to follow my presentation that will be also moderated by Mr. Kıvanç, and it will be a key panel, but I would also like to get several questions and I will collect them in groups of three questions. Fatih Bey, thank you very much for this contribution. It's always an honor to listen to you. For the sake of time, my question is, there are three regions that you're referring to in your presentation: developing countries, Europe, and Russia. How about America, United States, and China? Thank you, Kıvanç Bey. And yes, gentleman over there, please. Thank you very much. Dr. Murat Onuk from the Saruk Battery Company. So in terms of climate change, in 1.5 degrees of raise in the temperature, do you think we can keep it lower and we can keep it there? Because our future depends on that. Thank you. During the panel discussion today, we don't have a lot of women attending, so I would be positively discriminating women for the questions at least. Thank you. İlkiye 11 from the Istanbul director of CFSO. Thank you for all the clarifications, and I'm sure that will be discussed in the future panels. But from your perspective, how can Turkey turn this into an advantage, or can Turkey turn it into an advantage? What will be our potential strengths for the future? One last question. Yes, Mr. Gentleman over there. Thank you very much. Ibrahim Erdan, Turkish Wind Association, and would like to ask an additional question about the role of Turkey, particularly from the perspective of EU. They had suffered some problems being dependent to a single country in energy supply, as you rightfully emphasized, which is a big problem in energy supplies. Similarly will happen in equipment supply and technology supply. So as to avoid such a future problem, how should the world, or specifically EU, be acting? Turkey has an advantage geographically because of her capacity in production and wind energy technologies. And how should Europe consider Turkey as a supplier for wind? Let me first start answering the first four and challenging questions, and there will be a second round of questions, of course. Okay, starting with the first question, United States and China. US situation, I mean, they are now critical in getting into a recession or not. This is this or that way situation. But if there are people who are interested in economy, I would highly recommend to look into the Inflation Reduction Act of the United States, which is merely or basically about energy. I would highly suggest that you look into that. Also, another strength of American economy will be basically due to the coping mechanisms of inflation, because they are now going through a big problem of inflation. Maybe compared to other countries, it's less bigger, but economically speaking, the biggest challenge that the US is going through is inflation, yet to a lesser extent than in Europe. And as for China, as to what will happen in China, how the Chinese economy will endure this crisis is a big question mark for the rest of the world. As I said, this winter may be handled with, minor bruises in Europe, but next year will be more challenging, totally dependent on the reaction of China. If, one of the reasons that Europe is trying to fill in their stocks in natural gas was that the Chinese economy is rather weak, because once the Chinese economy is weak, for the first time after many years, LNG import of China declined, and Europe purchased this LNG that has been available. So if the Chinese economy recovers, if COVID restrictions are lifted and they get back on track in their economy, there will be a higher demand for energy in China, one of them being gas and LNG imports. And in this respect, the LNG market, which is already a narrow one, will be purchased by China totally, having and leaving negative implications for Europe, and the same for inflation as well. Because, speaking for the entire energy and economy, everyone is looking into the COVID restrictions. But the Chinese economy, I have to say, is strong. But if, whether they can stand up again this year in 2023, we don't know. But this totally depends on their coping capacity with COVID. But we would expect that China will not be that much affected from the crisis as the three regions I've been covering. 1.5 degree temperature rise that has been a target for all of us for the purposes of climate change, whether we can catch up with that. Now, for those who are interested, I have to say that scientists in different parts of the world do claim that up to 1.5 degrees, if due to climate change, if we get 1.5 degrees higher, we can more or less cope with it. I mean, typhoons and, some drought and floods, maybe, okay, but we will manage. But after 1.5 degrees Celsius, 1.723, then it will be total bad results. And truly, it's a challenge. And the big transformation, of course, in the energy sector, fossil-based energy systems that we're accustomed to, how they can be replaced with clean energy resources, which is an incredible transformation. And I still do believe that it's doable. Although quite difficult, it's doable, can be quite possible. And there are those, though, who say the contrary, who say that it would be not undoable, it would be impossible to achieve. There was an important interview I gave just recently. The 1.5 degree target is now that is an interesting coalition that they voice out loud that 1.5 target is no longer possible. Some scientists, as well as countries advocating for the fossil energy fuels, and some journalists come together. You know, these 5 unlike parties come together and claim that the target for 1.5 degrees is dead now. But I do believe that that door is not closed yet. We still do have chances if you pay enough attention to figures. And it would be very difficult to say the contrary scientifically, and politically it's quite dangerous to say that 1.5 degree target is no longer alive. Because if you say that it's that, 1.7 or 2 degrees will be endangered as well. So if you would ask me, 1.5 degree target is still there, although it's going through difficult times, but I still do hopes in there, although small ones. As for Turkey, another question posed about our potential position in this crisis. Turkey has already been affected seriously by the implications of war, and the panel after me will be discussing about the Turkish economy and how it's affected. But from the aspect of renewables, I want to note something. Renewable energy has been going through a frog leap in Turkey, and we have people from the public sector who have been after that. I'm sure that they are following it quite closely. But quite frankly, we do expect in the next 5 years a 2/3 or up to 65% growth in Turkish renewable energy sector, which will be amongst the top 10 in Europe. Top 10 in world and top 4 in Europe, to correct it. Top 4 in Europe, top 10 in the world in terms of growth potential. So there is a really big potential out there. Solar, wind, geothermal, I think, and hopefully will be our ways of getting out of this crisis, and will be strengthening our renewable industry as a result. And the last question was posed by Mr. Ibrahim. Technology dependency, which I believe is another critical aspect here to discuss. Natural gas and Russia, the 2 dilemmas, of the day, but solar and some other country may be the next dilemma of the future. So this is something that people are paying attention to now. And again, as an example of solar, 95% of solar panels in the world are manufactured in China. As I said, some countries will be driving the future with their industrial policies. And some governments are giving subsidies and tax exemptions to support their local production of clean energy technologies. And with all these efforts, particularly United States and India have been quite keen in providing this support so that this dependency to Russia will decline down to 75% in the next 5 years. Still a big figure, but within 5 years only, 20% of a gain is also critical. So these investments have already been in place and almost there to be finished. Therefore, I would say that we have high hopes that the country's dependency to a single country will not be there, because the countries or the governments have been learning and taking their lessons from the existing crises. So it's not just fossil fuels, but the new energy resources that will be focused on energy security. So I think I have been 45 minutes behind my schedule, so I need to finish after one last question from this lady in the front.
Hayranlıkla takip ediyorum.
I'm quite admired to you to say that single-use vehicles, how they can be banned from the traffic. Do you think that it will be possible except for transporters? Do you think that this would have a huge contribution to general climate crisis and climate change? And after that question by the lady, I will finish.
Vallahi biz de buradayız ama.
Günaydın.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Bahar Özay from Bosphorus University, coordinator of in Turkey. And actually, I closely follow your studies. Professor Sak saying that, especially in this region, due to the critical issues, it's very important to cooperate and to collaborate. And actually, is there any research about an issue, the Black Sea? Especially in terms of wind energy, once the weather is so favorable, at the Northern Sea it is too calm, but once it is actually too windy, at the Northern Sea, at the Black Sea, it's actually calmer. So maybe with an energy, in particular cooperation, maybe it would be possible to create an energy basin. And at the Black Sea, actually that is the storage effect of the Black Sea. About this topic, I think maybe you discussed about turning this crisis into an opportunity. And what do you think we can do from the perspective of clean energy? Thank you very much. One very last question at the back, because it will be disrespect to the others. Just one very final question, please. And Handan Cömert Baydan, my question is 60%, for example, of a growth, there will be some negations. In terms of sustainability and in terms of environment, my question is, in terms of sustainability, all these countries, the countries that are putting at the forefront, they are giving the licenses for nothing randomly, or is it just, for example, interconnected to each other, for example, by saying renewable energy in the entire portfolio? Do they have a master plan, for example, giving priority to wind, solar or so? And my second question is about storage. We know that there are issues with regards to battery. Battery storage is not that much advanced. Is there any hope for this? Two questions is enough, I'm sorry. But the third way, it's actually a disrespect for the others. I'm very sorry to interrupt, but maybe we actually should have started earlier. I don't know, maybe next time we can do it that way. For these three colleagues, let me answer the questions. About the single driver vehicles, I mean, totally banning it, I mean, single driver use car, totally banning it from traffic. I mean, if there is one single driver in the car, not allowing the car to be in the traffic circulation. I mean, not possible to totally ban this practice. Maybe there will be disadvantageous routes to be given to single drivers, and if there are multiple people in the car, maybe some advantages in the traffic circulation or so. The second topic would be about taxation. Again, for example, if one vehicle is being used by multiple people, and if more than one, the driver and more than one passenger, maybe there will be a financial instrument, so as ease taxation. But for myself, I would say, I mean, as the International Energy Agency, especially mass transportation is something that we underline. What we believe is that the countries should encourage use of mass transportation. That's the thing. Cooperation, the question from our colleague from the Bosphorus University. Well, you know, looking the energy and the climate goals set at the global level, you also asked the question whether we can actually reach to the goal of 1.5 degrees centigrade. So challenging to reach these goals. However, if there is cooperation between countries, it would be less challenging. Without cooperation, I would say it would be impossible. For example, COP meeting. But there are different ideas, whether success or fail and so on, but I think there's something that you have never read from the newspapers. The for example, China and the United States, for the first time, in an unofficial manner, started talks on climate. As you all know, two major emission producers in the world, Pelosi visited Taiwan right after that, and the talks stopped. But in COP27, it's already started, and in G20 summit, President Biden and Xi Jinping officially started the talks. If there is a cooperation in between the two countries, I believe that technology will be used among different countries with less cost, and at the same time, it will be possible to reach our goals more. The question about the Black Sea, the project, I'm not totally aware of that project, and I'd be more than pleased to have a look at that project. And a question by Handan about these licenses, licensing. Of course, it is not something done randomly. For example, between wind power plants, for example, the distance between different wind power plants and the distance to the settlement areas, there is a plan, of course. Especially, there is actually a long bureaucratic process, and the main aim is actually to, in a way, simplify and accelerate that process. But one important thing to mention, it's always Germany, and at the same time the policies followed by Germany, and we discussed about dependence to Russia. However, Germany, for example, about accelerating the licensing process, if you're asking me, has taken several important steps together with the other countries. The question about battery storage, right, there are issues and challenges about this, but there are so many works being done, too many investment on battery storage. It's okay, there will be some challenges, but in terms of cost and in terms of the battery itself, the battery to be in the market, I'm sure that we'll get some good news in the near future. It is minus 52 minutes that I talked over my time, and I apologize from Doğan Bey and others. Thank you very much, my dear colleagues, as it's always the case. You actually bear my eroded Turkish. Thank you very much for that. And I wish a great 2023, a better year to all of you, to the entire world. And I mean, although we do not have too much reason to be hopeful, I would say, but still we have to be very hopeful. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Fatih Birol, but please be on the stage for a little while. We will have a photo together, a family photo all together. The very first row, the protocol, the first row, please be on the stage, and you too, Fatih Birol, please.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Sağ olun.
Thank you all. Dr. Fatih Birol, once again, thank you very much for your keynote speech.
Evet.
Now, as we have actually observed during the speech by Fatih Birol, there's a great, huge potential in terms of renewables, also for Turkey. 65% of the growth that we're speaking about is a prediction for the upcoming 5 years. And but now let's actually have a more clear picture. View of the pictures. Therefore, I would like to invite the director of Istanbul International Center for Energy and Climate, Sabancı University, IICEC, the IICEC Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook 2022 report launch presentation. Bora Şekip Güray, please. Thank you. Well, the launch presentation of IICEC Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook 2022 report, of course, addressing to you after Mr. Birol is quite challenging, and we actually have a nice panel to follow me. So as to just reserve some time for the panel, I would like to just go through the highlights. And there are 7 recommendations in this report, and I will end my talk. Probably you're following us. This is the 3rd book that we have within the framework of IICEC Outlook series under the leadership of Mr. Birol. In 2019, we have set an energy model, and in 2020, we have a holistic approach, and we have the Turkey Energy Outlook report published, especially try to focus on areas of interest, and it also helped us to have a good database. And last year, Turkey Electric Vehicles Outlook 2021, and this year, Renewable Energy Outlook. Now, these 2 industries are very important. Why? Because as we all know, Turkey in the field of energy is an importer country, and at the same time, you continue to have rising emissions. Especially land transportation and electricity generation in Turkey in total is half of the energy import bill of the country. With clean energy, which is based actually on renewable energy, if it is free from the fossil fuels, then we will reduce by half the cost of it for Turkey. Land transportation and the electricity generation, these 2 things, at the same time responsible for half of the emissions of Turkey. And therefore, again, freeing this industry from the fossil fuel will at the same time will even reducing down to 0 the carbon footprint. Therefore, this very first book and the following 2 books address 2 major issues of Turkey: the energy import, also a current account, the current balance deficit. Of course, there will be several additional things like renewable and hydrogen. There will be others to come. Now the opportunities that I'll get to, but we have too many tanks to go, as Ms. Sabancı also stated initially. Over 100 experts and leaders, we asked for their opinion, support, and contribution. Of course, we have our acknowledgements also in the book. We have the printed copies of the book and the executive summary and the digital copy. How you will have access, I will tell you at the end of the presentation. My special thanks would go to the societies, the chairs and the secretary generals. For example, Turkish Wind Energy Association, I would like to thank to TESİAD, EYÜT, ELDER, too many. It's all societies that have been a part of us from the very beginning in terms of how they comment, they contributed with their perspectives. So 7 recommendations by IICEC, of course, as a result of the analytical modeling, especially where we should be focusing on, where we should accelerate more, how it will help us for a more clean and secure energy supply for Turkey. Now, first of all, electricity system balance, that is coming the demand first. Not only an electricity system based on renewables, by the way, there is an opportunity for the growth in demand and how we can realize it in a much more productive manner. So we have two scenarios. The slow scenario, things will not go faster than it is today, both in terms of market conditions, financing, licensing, and let's assume that it does not develop in the manner that we ask for. So the productivity areas cannot be well utilized. The second thing is the high scenario. High demand for renewables, especially in wind and solar, used a lot. And Turkey, especially in industry, in households, and agriculture, realize the high efficiency. And there's going to be 15% of a difference in demand. In the high scenario, and by 2050, under the same quality, same comfort, energy demand is less. That is especially in the gross, and it can be met. The second thing is the net demand, not the gross, but the net demand. It is not in here, but this IICEC grant, that's the transportation, land transport. There will be a huge growth. Therefore, there will be a demand as much as the industry, we can say. This is the net demand if the opportunities are utilized. And the building households, again, will be more the demand, especially heat pump, for example, efficient heat pump. If started to be used as a part of a clean energy, if they are more involved in the system, that's the demand side. Now moving to the right side, that is the installed capacity. In between the two scenarios, in terms of total installed capacity, there's no major difference. I mean, 300 gigawatts we can think about in average. It is threefold more than today. In the upcoming 28 years, it means that we will have an installed capacity 3 times more of today for Turkey. But among the scenarios, in distribution of this installed capacity, and once we started electricity generation and the composition of distribution, there are differences. Starting with the slow pace scenario, the share of renewables up to 60% by 2050. For this, I think it is 43% that we will end up for this year. Quite a modest. The other, mostly nuclear energy, natural gas, and coal-fueled power plants will continue to be with us so as to meet the demand. But in the high scenario, less productivity. Again, in wind and solar and in geothermal, the potential is faster and higher. We realize that faster and higher. Wind plus solar, these two, and this contribution to electricity generation will increase by 4-fold in the upcoming 28 years. So we'll go up to 67%. So one of the major messages we would like to underline is by 2050, Turkey in electricity generation, 2/3 will be from wind and solar. Can meet it from wind and solar. On the top of this, geothermal, hydroelectricity, biomass should be included on this because there's also huge potential there. Then this goes up to 87%, almost 87 from 67%. So by 2050, almost 90% of electricity generation can be met from the renewables, wind and solar, but coal will no more be there, and the nuclear power has a contribution, and the natural gas, especially flexible and efficient natural gas fueled power plants, will continue to be operational. Now, such a growth in demand and the supply composition, what about the need for investment? On the left side, you can see the annual average investment requirement for the electricity industry. I mean, electricity generation and all the other areas, I mean, distribution, storage, and at the same time focusing on efficiency on the demand side. In between the two scenarios, no major difference. I mean, the high scenario is much more ambitious, but still just 6% higher than the slow scenario. And $14.1 billion in average, I can see. The other is 14.9 in average. and the investment requirement, and do not consider it like the initial years. Of course, it is through 2050, once capacity in the system of Turkey increased. And about the breakdown of investment, we expect a change, and we wish for it. Otherwise, the opportunities in the high scenario may not be utilized. For example, the grids storage is almost none, and the efficiency investments on the demand side, its share in the total portfolio is 1/5. In the slow scenario, down to 1/3. As you can see, other electricity generation, including nuclear and the fossil fuel base, and the others still have an important share. In the high scenario, the grids, energy storage, and efficiency on the demand side, the investments, the share, goes up to 1/3. I mean, 1 out of 3 units of investment in the upcoming 28 years, 1 unit at least, will be for the grid optimization, energy storage, efficiency on the demand side. That's what we recommend. Now, very quickly, about this evolution, it is in terms of energy security, environmental performance, how it is going to be reflected. Well, fossil fuel input, I told you almost 90% of renewable generation basket. Of course, there is actually a huge decline in the import for fossil fuels. You can see a high scenario with the with dark green. So in the slow scenario, if this is the case, then we have to continue with the fossil fuels. On the other hand, according to the calculations, how about the greenhouse gas emissions due to the electricity industry? You can see by 2030 the peak point, and by 2050 it can go down even the level of 1990, even could be less. The remaining is just a natural gas is still in the system, and the emission from the natural gas. In the slow scenario, the emissions like plateau in the upcoming 30 years, so it's an important opportunity. In terms of intensity, I mean, also we put the electricity demand there. This is the intensity of the grid. 5 units absolute emission reduction, and 2-folds of an increase in electricity demand. 5 times 2, that is the carbon intensity. 10 times of a reduction in intensity for emission, especially for the industry, which is actually exporting to Europe. It's an important gain. Okay, we do some investments at one side, and we have some benefits on the other, in terms of energy import, environmental performance, and so on, but at what cost? So, how if we invest more? So, as I told you, more like $800 million of an investment annual, like the grids and so. But as Fatih Birol announced pledges scenario, the fossil fuel prices, $2 billion less Turkey will be paying for natural gas and import coal. Of course, in higher prices, it can actually go elsewhere. In parentheses, for example, if the energy prices remain as so, this says $2 billion in here, but it can $7.5 billion. So the second thing is about the saving from the cost of the emissions is another topic. $100 per ton carbon price, $6.7 billion. Each year, Turkey will make a saving. Therefore, total of the green bars, $8.7 billion of a saving, as you can see, with just additional 800 million. So it is quite cost effective. 1 to 10, we can say, 1 to 10 of a gain that you will have. As I told you initially, it is not only the electricity industry. Of course, the energy model allows us to have a holistic approach in hand. The buildings, the households, transportation, and agriculture. How about the direct contribution of renewables. For example, geothermal greenhouses or geothermal urban heating. Or, for example, which is not in system today, but in the future, there will be biofuel-based, sustainable vehicles, and so on. Quite striking, in 1990, all these direct renewable resources, and it is share over 15% in Turkey's overall. Mostly biomass, traditional biomass, especially geothermal or effect of solar was so marginal at that time. Of course, once they are decommissioned, because, you know, natural gas, electrification, which more advanced technology, this share reduced, and only 5% as of last year. That is the share of direct renewable energy in the total final energy demand of Turkey. We have also checked for this geothermal. Other than electricity generation, what could be the gains? For example, the solar collectors, whether they can be used more, or the opportunities for biomass, like in transportation and agriculture, whether we may use them more or not, and almost threefold of an increase, 5% by 2050. In the high scenario, it can go up to, again, 15%, as you can see in the dark green part of the bar. The second thing is electrification. I mean, over electrification, how renewables contribute. As we all know today, 2 out of 10 units is consumed in the form of electricity. But electrification is actually a very popular trend with the public support and with the investment of the private industry. So this it will be 10 to 4, which is 10 to 2 now. And again, 90%, if we multiply it, 35% from there, 15% direct contribution, 35% from electricity. Therefore, renewable energy will be half of the total energy demand. So we'll match it as such by 50%. So therefore, 50% of the final energy demand will not be dependent abroad. No natural gas, no imported coal, no fossil fuel, plus 50% is free from carbon. The remaining 50%, especially carbon capture in industry, like hydrogen in industry, hydrogen in transportation, or maybe more advanced technologies in the upcoming years can well be used. And Turkey, through 2050, hopefully, will actually adopt the net zero policy. Of course, in doing so, we actually have a roadmap. We should have a roadmap. That is a need. Once we talk to the stakeholders, the NGOs, the societies, the academicians, that's what we need. What is going to be our target and goals for 2050, what milestones we should have. So at the very first talk we put it there, and the other one is a recipe as IICEC. I mean, in renewables, just to be more powerful, more sustainable, which areas we should focus on, in which areas we're not that much good in our performance, or in which areas we have actual potential. Very quickly, I will go through these recommendations. First of all, number one, of course, the macro recommendation, at least 250 gigawatt by 2050. I mean, in renewable energy installed capacity, we should have reached at least 250 gigawatts, which means by 85 to 90% of a share of a renewable energy generation, and at the same time 50% of a share of renewables in final energy demand. I mean, a roadmap actually safeguarding this goal, and also with a participatory approach. The second recommendation, maybe the most critical thing in here, is actually in investments, the investment climate, financing, banks, not only valid for the renewables, but for the entire electricity industry, to have an electricity market which is much more efficient, which more depth, more reflecting the costs, and a more predictive electricity market. Our GM of the Turkish Electricity Generation Corporation is also here. The third thing is about the grids. The grids will not be as usual, as we discussed last year, due to e-mobility, especially on the demand side. I mean, the demand will be much more fluctuating. So together with the renewables, for interrupted due to solar and wind at the same time, we expect more fluctuations, and therefore a much more challenging grid that we have to establish and make it viable. So the third recommendation is to strengthen the capacity and agility, flexibility of the grids, which is actually the backbone of the electric system in Turkey. Recommendation number 4, as Mr. Birol also underlined, also asked in the questions, and I'm sure that will be another discussion point at the panel, and about development of wind and solar technology. Turkey has taken so many major steps, and this should continue at the same pace. I mean, the domestic market should be strengthened more. We should have more competitive edge as Turkey. And there are also good news that we hear from here: energy storage, green hydrogen, especially in technology intense areas, to have more R&D activities. And because otherwise, just being an investor and just doing installation would be not enough, would not be enough. So recommendation number 5 about energy efficiency. Of course, there are so many subheadings like insulation performance in buildings, electrical motors used in industry, especially somehow removing from traffic some of the heavy cars, and maybe more mobility, e-mobility, but having a holistic approach to geothermal energy, not only actually for constructing power plants, but also using them for local heating purposes at the local level, and if necessary to give some subsidies there. Recommendation number 6, energy efficiency potential. It is the case for the entire value chain, and on the top of this, from the industry, we have so many good examples for digitalization. Use of digitalization for energy efficiency is very important. So not only in the electricity industry, but as I told you, in all the final, it's actually possible to have more added value and turn them into opportunities. Final recommendation number 7. I can say in a way it is a must for the previous 6 recommendations. That is to say, well-trained, qualified human resources that we need, and both in battery storage, hydrogen, and wind and solar, and of course in all other opportunities at the same time, to have the well-trained, highly qualified human resources. We need to establish that, maintain that, and of course the entrepreneurship ecosystem should be further enhanced. These are the recommendations. So, in ending my talks, once again, I would like to thank to all the experts who contributed to this report, and at the same time, Fatih Birol with his visionary approach, and very distinguished members of IICEC. Thank you very much. Now, I will keep the slide on the screen for some time, because you can see a square code in here. You can have your mobile phone read the square code, QR code. You can go directly to our web page, 280 pages of a report, including the executive summary. You can have access to this book, and at the same time you can download my presentation as well. And at the end of the conference, at the same time, you will get the printed copies of the executive summary of our book. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bora Bey, çok teşekkürler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Güray. Well, we're moving to the panel. And now, as referred to frequently by the speakers, I will be announcing the speakers one by one. Moderator of the session will be Mr. Kıvanç Zaimler from Sabancı Holding, Head of Energy Group. CEO of Zorlu Energy, Mr. Sinan Ak. Enes Amasyalı, Borusan NBW Energy GM, Ahmet Erdem, Shell Türkiye Country Head, Semra Kuran, ING, and Sanko Energy CEO Hakan Yıldırım.
Buyurun.
Evet, ben de bütün katılımcıları
I would like to extend my warmest regards to all participants, and dear panelists, welcome to the panel. I think there is no need for me to introduce you. There is a time pressure on us. But of course, we have such a crowd for your talk, Dr. Fatih. I wish you spoke less and we could summarize your sayings. Your Q&A session is quite exciting. Both you and the International Energy Agency are quite disciplined to provide, the core of everything about to energy policymakers, to politicians who are not specialized in this field, even to simple people. You are talking in such a simple way. Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's like the world tour for us in a high level. So was the report of IICEC, and Bora really had to go quickly because of time pressure. Now we have about 45 minutes and we are quite relieved time-wise, but Bora also has been quite simple in explaining the Outlook report, but there lies an incredibly analytical report behind the simplistic explaining. I think the most important gain of IICEC in Fatih Bey here is this analytical perspective. So as IICEC, we want to go on with it in Turkey. Well, the panel is important, but as a warm-up tour, I would like to turn back to one of the slides of Bora Bey, the last one indeed, with 7 recommendations. 250,000 megawatts. 250 gigawatts sound quite light, but 250,000 megawatts of a renewable energy capacity, I think, should be the most important target for us. Okay.
sormak istiyorum.
And would like to ask panelists, for this target to be achieved, do you think that all the targets are reachable? 250,000 megawatts simultaneously with the rest of the 6 targets. And with a 1 sentence to warm up, to start up. If you were to prioritize one of these 7 priorities, from technology to HR to efficiency, there is a broad range of priorities listed. Which one do you think is the number 1 of these priorities? Motivations, I think. We need to be motivated properly. We need to hook onto the target. And if this is the target to be achieved, I think this is not something undoable, so we need to be quite decisive and motivated. And number 2, maybe to follow technological advancements, because, technology advancing will help us a lot. Correct investment in the right time by the right way of technology. More than 1 sentence, but motivation I take. Enes Bey? Amongst the 7 recommendations, I think number 2 would be my priority. Particularly lawmakers and financial institutions, as well as investors, should be brought together in a common denominator. so that investment and financial models can be built together. I think that would be the key, of course, paving the way for a liberal market and instrumentations that will also contribute to the market. So a functioning market also will bring along project stock. Ahmet Bey, all I would say, but if I were to pick one, I again would say number 2, because all the useful words that I like are there: efficiency, deep, cost-reflecting, predictable market functioning, sustainable investment environment. These are all the keys, I think, otherwise we cannot make the rest come true. You know, I am a representative of the finance market, but I again would go for number 2. Independently from the group that I'm representing, I think we need to turn a key to make our dreams come true. The correct financing will make it possible. Hakan Bey, well, as we were working on these recommendations with Bora, we elaborated a lot on number 2, but there are some key components under number 2. Predictability. I think predictability is really key. You know, my colleagues don't know that I was to ask this question before the panel, so we would understand that we are, you know, gathering around number 2 by no coincidence, though. This is an expectation from all the participants of the sector. Okay, let's kick the ball, and 12:30 will be the time to end, definitely, and we will keep that promise. And of course, I will start from Ahmet Bey. I'm just going to ask the first question. Russian-Ukrainian war and the debate about energy security in Europe and the record-breaking prices all there. Fatih Bey has been, you know, quite polite in his language that we are doomed. But I will be more frank. Would you have some predictions for 2023 and 24? Actually, as Fatih Bey explained, 2023, 4 and beyond, I mean, all discussed in his presentation, quite hard to add something to that, but I mean, going through the end of the year, you know, in every domain there are caricatures and drawings. I mean, people are just going through the dream. Maybe, you know, by the end of 21, the effect of the pandemic was disappearing, social economies were normalizing, and we were in a real fantasy that everything would be wonderful in 2022. But with Russia, invading Russia, everything turned upside down, with impacts, more than maybe everything, humanitarian aspects, houses coming down, families broken apart, and you know, millions of people displaced. These are really the bitter sides of the story, of course, probably the hardest to repair. But beyond that, if you would ask me, maybe parallel to energy, food crises have become apparent. The two countries were exporting 60% of sunflower, 30% of all grains, and in other commodities there was the risk of high prices, and the energy, of course. I humbly would like to react to Fatih Bey's remarks that I totally agree. I mean, in terms of not being dependent to Russia, the world has made a mind, particularly Europe. Europe will put Russia in minimum ways to this equation. Of course, there will be some implications to that. In the short run, there are some saving measures. My son is living in the Netherlands, and I went to his house last week. When I went there and I checked the temperature in the room, it was 16 degrees, 16. I said, can we just bring it up higher, just a few degrees more? He said, no, unfortunately, we cannot. And a similar example from a hotel, they adjusted it to 15 degrees in winter conditions. And if you want to get it higher, you have to pay a fine. The chances of the war coming to an end, if you ask me, it's quite unlikely. I mean, in the short run, Europe, I don't know if people will be waiting until Europe gets into more pressure, but next winter will be a bit worse. So the short-term savings are semi-enlightening, even in the most gorgeous parts of the city. But in this, flow, Europe now has no way to evade from new energy technologies, and renewable energy resources will be supporting these resources maybe more than ever, and the implications are already there. So 2023, we need to be more prepared for 23 as a world, of course, including Turkey. There will be some expected implications. The relations that Turkey is running is just making us be relieved a bit. We are in a different position than Europe, but we need to be prepared for every unexpected development or situation. So we must be prepared for 2023. And beyond that, as we've listened from Fatih Bey, we must keep on leaping to the new and renewable energy resources as the players of the sector in Turkey and as a country. I think we must catch up with these opportunities that are out there for us as well. And by the way, this report of IICEC is quite timely. And of course, content-wise, it's quite right. I would like to thank everyone having contributed to the preparation of the report. Thank you, Ahmet Bey. And there was one thing that I have to refer to the report. There is, one chapter, 800 million, that will be like 8+ billion. If I were from the press, you can just say that in the headlines that we need to put an extra zero. But do we have the money to be able to do that? How about the perspective of the financial world? Green Deal, and there are many renewable actions that are planned by Europe. Finances. How about the perspective of the financiers as the bank? What is your position? There is money to that, but the money is not an issue. The issue is to be able to transfer the money to correct funds that will be defined by existing habits and our dependency to the ways of living that we used to depend upon. Global collaborations are important, and one or two things I'd like to emphasize. COP, you referred to, developing countries and developed countries now are having difficult times in managing many aspects, not only climate, but other fields do have really big gaps, unfairness. And on one side, United States, China, big countries that are the big and of the biggest that suffer losses, both resources ideologically and supplies. Two giants of the world can sit on the same table: rich, poor countries, academia, and even the companies undertaking responsibilities for their roles. I think are not the platforms that are being built that I find quite relevant for two important reasons. Number one is scientific, data-based facts will have already shed light to our faces, seeing the reality. Therefore, the role of academia must be appreciated. So once we see the problem, a target vision must be set. This was done by these collaborations. The second important thing is very complex, multi-partite problem, not just crisis, but the other aspects considered altogether. I think by way of concrete recommendations, this debate environment was created so that all the parties were involved in the debate. I think otherwise we cannot handle these problems. Therefore, coming together, we'll have some important victory in terms of reaching a compromise. From the COP side, sometimes we get into despair. Sometimes 1.5 degree of the target in the Paris Agreement seems to be quite impossible to catch, but there is already the way that we've made emissions are expected to increase in the global carbon budget. On the other side, McKinsey's latest reports, one of them indicate that the energy side or the electricity generation side, compared to other resources, there is a demand increase which is quite extensive. Also, 2050, that was set as the target here, is expected to have this demand of electricity quite high in other ways of energy. Plus, in the according to the 2030 electricity generation prediction report of International Energy Agency, when compared to 1.5, it's just recommended to be doubled. So here, the finance need will be so huge. But turning to from where I start, as we have a clear path of the international agencies and the countries as well, with the collaboration of the governments as well, because you know the legislative structures, permits, times, and to the incentives provided. I think these facilitating actions have already been contributing to the correct investments in correct places. As Bora shared the report today, it's really important. As we know, the roadmap is quite clear, and the only thing we need to be doing is to pave the way for that direction. Finance is not just local, by the way, although we do pay importance to renewables, energy generation. We say that it's something that would reduce dependence to abroad, but the expectations of the investors also are changing. Here they do see the opportunities lying there, and they want to be involved in the process. Therefore, international money flow must be attracted to our country, which I think is really important, and every country will have their own actions, but the role of the global banks must be emphasized here. This bridging role, I think, will be quite critical for the global banks as their contribution and as our mission. Because on one side, the European Union will find its position in all this equation and all this collaboration, and coming together has been the pushing force there. Therefore, as a country that is regulating itself according to the regulations of the European Union, we are taking them as the benchmark in the banking sector, and we're involved in many cooperations and collaborations in this respect. So if you would ask me, both for the purposes of Turkey and also the strategic banking planning for us, we must have a thorough, sound planning for the investment, and we see the role of the banks there. Maybe with a few sentences, I also need to emphasize United Nations. It's an important actor in common platforms. They have the environment program finance initiative, almost 300 global banks, half of them global banks, are signatories, which mean that in the decision-making mechanisms, climate and other sustainability parameters have now been prioritized, maybe more than ever. So this process will walk hand in hand. As much as the governments take an initiative, the finance sector will be ready to make a contribution for that as well. Collaboration with institutions really do matter. We've seen major players in the real sector so far, but in the commercial and individual aspects, all the people and the companies must undertake some responsibility in this field, and they should do some planning activity as the banks and as the finance sector. We will be standing by them and providing them with correct financial solutions so that they can continue their path. So this is my aspect of the discussion. When we were at COP20, there was a caricature that we've seen. The Western business business people were represented in the desert. They put their heads in the sand. And I mean, this is something that just I remembered. Crises bring along opportunities. And the world wars paved the way for the biggest innovations. Probably, Fatih Bey, listening to you, the role of the disruptive technologies will be even stronger in the years to come. And I want to say that I've seen Ahmet Bey, the head of IICEC. I mean, don't be offended. IICEC is our biggest guarantee. And we will be evolving together, flourishing together, so that we can promise financing and sustainable investments to our investors. And we are all working in that vision. I didn't see you previously, so welcome. So Enis Bey, I'd like to turn to you. Within this energy crisis that we've been going through, do you think will have some implications in the global renewable energy sector, as well put by Ahmet Bey, as to what we've been going through so far? Climate crisis has already been on our agenda for quite a long time, as you know. In this perspective, transformation for clean energy was on the table. We've gone through the pandemic, you know, the wrap-up after the pandemic, demand increase, commodity prices increasing, extreme climate events, and the disruption of the supply chain brought us to this, you know, incredibly high commodity prices, and in inflation we can see the footsteps coming. And with the energy crisis, to an extent, we started experiencing that in the months of fall, and with the Ukrainian-Russian war, the name is now registered. This is the very first energy crisis, deeper than ever and more complicated than ever. So within two crises, there is a big transformation that we've been going through. This generation is going through the energy transformation plus the birth of a new energy economy. As you pay attention to previous transformations, both have been quite, you know, shaky, painful. From 1700s, the first transition to coal. I mean, this transformation took place more than a century. And then the next century, the first discovery of oil, 1859. And then oil trespassing, coal becoming the dominant fuel, 1600s, about 100 years again we are speaking here. So this challenge we are facing right now is that these transformations took place by adding to the existing range of fuels. Now we are going through a more disruptive process. We don't have time. Within, I mean, a bit more than a quarter century, by 2050, we will have to resolve the energy and the climate crisis altogether. Now here, another important note to emphasize here is $100 trillion worth of an economy that is to be exposed to transformation. I mean, in such a short span of time. Within a time of quarter of those in the past. Nevertheless, there are some promising developments as well, as Fatih Bey shared in detail. A response to the energy crisis actually have come from the governments in a very multi-cornered way. US Inflation Lowering Act, Europe EU program, Japan, Green Transformation Program, China, India having announced targets, all of them put together, we now have a clear answer to the question. This energy crisis and will definitely be accelerating transformation to clean energy. When doing that, of course, the main motivation was the climate crisis used to be a bit dull until the energy crisis of the current time has exposed itself. It's become #1 priority. Supply security and also fuel diversity. I think #2 would be my first priority, but #3, industrial transformation, decarbonization of the industry, and new technologies, paving the way for technology. We are lucky because today clean energy, renewable energy unit prices now are quite low versus fossil fuels. And on the other hand, high fossil fuel prices are boosting this transformation already. Emphasized already twice, and I will also be saying once again, the next 5 years I think will be as an installed capacity will be introduced as in the last 20 years. I mean, quite ambitious, quite promising targets. Getting into the details of that, we would see that this growth, on the other hand, by 2/3 will be on the side of Europe, China, US, and India. It means that I mean, thinking about the time of the pandemics, recovery packages were allocated, and for the figures in these packages, if I'm not mistaken, $1.4 trillion worth of packaging, and I'm speaking about this portion allocated to clean energy, but 95% is from United States or Europe or developed countries. Therefore, geographically speaking, there is an unfair situation, I mean, an unbalanced situation. 2/3 of this growth will come from developed countries, but developing countries should catch up with this race. There is this big debate going on, the cumulative invoice of the emissions so far, who will be paying for that, and who will be paying for this invoice in the future. And this is amongst the main arguments of developing countries and underdeveloped countries. I think financing is the key that will serve for an acceleration of this transformation. So international financial institutions must be making available these resources to developing countries. Another challenge, maybe I think, is not going to break our hopes, but it's quite apparent. 2,400 gigawatts have already made it clear to us. Another matter is critical minerals next to fossil fuels. There will be the critical minerals to boost the engine of new transformation. Critical minerals to be more fairly distributed, and on the other hand, once you pay attention to the core mines, it will take minimum 10-15 years to commission the new mines, which by itself is a challenge. But putting each and every one of these items under each other, we would expect and we would see that this transformation is already underway with a clear motivation. This winter and the next winter will be quite a challenge, but after winter comes summer, and you need not just one flower but many flowers for spring to come. So the global energy crisis, I am sure, and deeply believing in that from the bottom of my heart, will make our spring blossom, and there will be exponential acceleration of this transformation with the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned about whether doing this is economical or not. And when saying renewables, Mr. Birol also stated that clean and at the same time secure. So especially it's important because it is about the climate effect and the supply security, but about the economic value. I mean, who is going to pay for it? He doesn't mention much about this, but I think with the competition in technology, there will be actually a benefit out of it because there's a cost of it. Now, Turkey Renewable Energy Outlook report, quite a good report. A lot of people contributed to this, and Hakan Yıldırım is one of them. In Turkey, as you all know, I think we really should be so enthusiastic about it. What are the threats and what are the opportunities? We have very limited time, by the way. That's the reason why. Actually, just a couple of words I plan to say with regards to the report. I think as we have very little time, I just would like to say thank you. And you brought us all together, and under your moderation, we have done a lot of things. This event is so important. By the end of the year, with the perspective of Mr. Birol, we actually have the chance to come together. Not only the study that we have this report as IICEC, but especially the man-hour cost of this event is actually so high. And in 5 to 10 minutes, just to increase the added value of my talk, my address in here, 16 CEOs and with 6 presidents of the societies, I had phone calls last couple of weeks, and 40,000 megawatts of installed capacity that they all represent. And these 2 basic questions that you asked to me, I asked them. And looking at the energy outlook of Turkey, what makes you the most enthusiastic? What do you dream of? And what is your biggest concern at the same time? What actually makes you wake up in the morning? And quite interestingly, I got so clear answers from what concerns you the most. Just with one single word. I don't know if it is in the Turkish language dictionary, but not being unpredictable. I mean, lack of, uncertainty. But they said we cannot predict for the future. Think about it. I mean, as CEO working in the power industry, so as to motivate the shareholders, you have to say something. When am I going to construct it? For example, if it is a power plant, what type of a cash flow I'll get out of this power plant? And over this revenue, whether there will be any limit, how about taxation policies, anything that is not in the feasibility report? Or for this power plant, what is going to be my financial resources for this? And the day that I really need that financing, what is going to be the cost of financing for me? And in making that decision for investment, what was the law in place, and in a couple of months will that law change? I mean, am I going to go through the official Gazette every Friday, check my computer screen, or ask my team from the WhatsApp, what did I miss, and so on? They need answers for these questions at the higher level, and other things at the macro level, in solar, in wind, in hydrogen, in storage. What are the strategies of the country, and the strategies and the targets that I set as the company, are they compatible with the strategies and the goals set by the government? And many of the CEOs cannot answer that question. We do not act as CEO, as COO, I'm an operational officer, without actually getting a goal, trying to keep motivation, try to manage the cash flow. And not being able to give an answer to this question is actually a reason for concerns, for anxiety. And of course, these concerns are not valid only for Turkey, because of the war. We actually are in a turmoil as the country, maybe in some populist approach. This is also the case in Europe, just to save the day. It is either taxation or price limitation. It is $80 in us, and the EU has a different amount. So maybe in the short run, especially the cost of not rising the bill of the final user, they're helpful as subsidies, but for the cash flow or required by the projects, it is actually an exposure of the external factors. I mean, in the middle and in the long run, it is just going to increase the risk premium over the projects. Think about it. 5 years ago, when we went to a bank, it was so easy to discuss about the wind project. How about the capacity and so on? Like the capacity factor is that much. So you put a check on this, based on the international report, $73, and then generation quantity, equity is 25% or 75% credit, so we get the financing. I mean, international insurance institutions are also covering for this. Today, I'm not speaking about tomorrow, we have more merchant markets. I mean, there will be a capacity increase. You will do, again, hybrid, because no more YEKDEM. You're just going to a bank. How much money are you going to make out of this project? What is going to be the cash? It is a free market. What is the free market price? Fluctuations in Brent oil, in coal, $80, let's say. This $80, it is okay, but let's make it $60. That is the free market. We would never know what's going to happen. What is going to be tomorrow, due to the populist policies, is that both the free market, I mean, this 80 will go down to 60, and additional, the bank would say, today we have the Russia, Ukraine, it's going to be another 2 countries in a couple of years, and so on. So the regulations can change immediately. There could be limitations or tax issues. So let's have a contingency reserve for $20. So let's increase your equity to 50%. We are saying, okay, renewable projects will go up, but this uncertainty will certainly have an impact on this. And then I asked the managers, the CEOs, just forget about the concerns. What is the most enthusiastic thing? And then I get two answers. Do not push me. Nothing is making me enthusiastic. And too many people said that, by the way. Another group of CEOs said, yes, there is a good economic transformation. There is green transformation. This is something that makes me so excited. Will be an area, a room for growth. This is renewable energy. It's not a hobby anymore. It's not a business. It is right now is actually a safeguard instrument for the country. So it will go up. So this makes you enthusiastic. This makes you excited because growth always makes so. Technology is advancing so fast. Being on the investor side and whether we can actually take a role in technology side, hydrogen is new, battery is new. This is also something that makes people excited. So eventually I would like to say both concerns and enthusiasm, two good things. You run after one so as to get rid of the other. So we can address our concerns much better. We can be much more excited and enthusiastic. Think about it. I mean, these are all major companies and I have no doubt that they'll be very successful in the future. Nice words. I also will put my signature under this. Yes, you're right. You need that stress, concern, and anxiety. This also helps the athletes to be successful. Hope that this will help for transformation. What's going to happen in the upcoming decade? A very shortened question because we don't have time. Maybe there will be another round. What would happen in the next decade? As Mr. Birol already already made a good introduction. I would say Europe, the developing countries, and Russia will incur some harm, and there will actually be a huge growth. But what is going to happen in the middle? It is that decade, if you're asking, that we're speaking about. This transformation is not something to happen in a fortnight. The nuclear power plants, as you all know. In Turkey, we started in 2010 or 12, and still we are saying it will be the case by 2023, but there will be some postponement. Not possible for it to be operational before 10 years. And about battery, the batteries and so on, it's okay. I mean, everyone is trying to make investments on this, and there are two battery factories, one by TOGG, and if I'm not mistaken, the second by Koch and Ford, but the batteries for vehicles. I mean, for energy storage, no. In other words, whether we have raw material, yes. I mean, the minerals, the mines that we have, we extract nickel, cobalt, the raw material used for the batteries. We have it in Turkey, but how long it takes to actually extract it, probably even in mining facilities, you have to construct them, and to minimize the environmental impact, it takes too long time. So if you're asking me, the upcoming decade will be a fill in the blanks. So it all depends on what is going to happen. For Europe, we started to invest in Europe, and especially for charging stations. The costs are high, 2.5-fold higher. Italy, France, Germany, no, but it's 2.5 times more. I mean, so expensive. It's expensive to invest in Europe, and then doing such investment and doing it in a competitive manner is not an easy task. I mean, for example, they use low-cost Russian gas for a long time in Europe, but this is no more the case, and therefore low-cost energy price. And we're back again saying renewables, but it is not actually so cheap. It will not come as cheap. I'm saying it when compared to US, China, Middle East. I mean, they will make these investments at a higher cost. They have to get back to hydrogen, which is actually so costly. Producing hydrogen in Europe, when compared to producing it to Middle East, is 2 times more. Because solar, sun power is, or the sun is actually by 50% less. I think Europe is in a bottleneck, and going through a bottleneck, and to exit from the bottleneck and to reach to the previous competitiveness is not easy. It's important for Turkey because they are our main trading partner. If they do not grow, Turkey will not grow. What will happen? It's okay, maybe I'm so pessimist, but always we have opportunities out of these crises. In the upcoming period, I guess the investments will shift through the Middle East, maybe to India, to the United States. This is what I think. I mean, Turkey will no more look towards Europe, but will shift towards the other countries, so as to do investment there, and also as a trading partner to sell products. Why? Because Europe, I cannot find any solution. I don't know. That's the reason why Fatih Birol did not say a lot. I was supposed to ask that question if he were here. How bad Europe will go in the upcoming decade? Okay, you can survive 1 year, 2 years, but if you're saying that it's going to last 10 years, I feel like it is challenging. But as I told you, it's there is opportunity for Turkey. I'm on the positive side. I'm enthusiastic, by the way. I'm excited, so I have a different perspective. It's the election year, 2023, so people feel like there is uncertainty, but that's not for me. I'm more positive. Why? First of all, Turkey can produce so much renewables. You know, we have actually a new, in solar, I guess, solar battery auction, actually, also with storage. It was 125,000 megawatts recently, if I'm not mistaken. And looking at the battery storage capacity in the world, it will take some time, but there is demand. At least there is demand, and there is motivation in people. I mean, people are willing to make investments, and people still are starving for investments. I think we have to turn the face to abroad, not only to Turkey. You always have to look. I talk to Kıvanç from time to time. What can you do? United States and so on. Especially, as Mr. Birol stated, this green, within the framework of their Green Deal, they have taken some decisions like taxation, subsidies, incentives, and so on. Seems like an opportunity for investment, and the Turkish investors should make use of it. On the other hand, as we said, there are also opportunities in Turkey. I think I have to wrap up. I attach so much importance to the gas of the Black Sea. If it is actually can go up to 25 DCM as mentioned in the upcoming 3 years, I believe this would change the entire course of Turkey. And especially this, another important thing is if Turkey sets the gas price, and it means that Turkey will actually use that gas. I also attach importance to relations with Israel. If we can bring that gas, then in the upcoming decade, Turkey, in all senses, I would say, will be advantageous. In parallel to this, I mean, we start for renewables, and we open up the horizon of the investors, the capacity, land, and so on. It looks like there's some chaos now, but everyone is an investor, by the way, in Turkey right now. It is not only, we're not only an investor in energy. I mean, anyone can do this. Therefore, once we open up the horizon, I guess we will have too many stakeholders in the energy. This is the case also for today. I mean, for the time being, for example, to Vestel, Fortex, to all, I'm just trying to construct power plants, not only us. So there are too many opportunities, so I'm very much motivated.
Timizden birkaç dakika alacağım. 2 dakikaya geçmeyecek söz.
Actually, I would like you to make a wish to the panelists. In renewables transformation of Turkey, if you actually have a chance to make a wish, other than health and others. Just like in Europe, for example, my wish is for licensing process. Osoke saying we have the wind and the solar. I would like to realize it and practice. So starting with Hakan, make a wish. I want the lawmakers to say, just do it. The lawmakers will make the infrastructure. You make money, just do it. And then that would be perfect. Stability, consistency. The lawmakers, the financiers, the stakeholders, everyone should run towards the same goal. If we achieve to have a unity in reaching our goals, we will have an open path. Yes, that's right. Uncertainty, unpredictability is an issue, but uncertainty will be everywhere. You know, also we've been through too many challenges, not only as Turkey, but also the entire world. So just to be consistent in our targets and goals and not to lose the enthusiasm. Ahmet, your wish. Again, recommendation number 2. That's the thing that I will make a wish for, but 2 words that I will add to this. Again, more project stock, it's okay, but at the same time, and reorganization, a coordination to make things faster. Let's not get into the details, by the way, but 2+, let's make it 2+. Okay, Enis. So I will raise it. So actually 2 criteria, but eventually the lawmaker, the investor, and the financiers should be in a common denominator. The investment and the financing mechanisms should be developed immediately. Of course, it is important to have a project stock, and there must be a liberal market, no doubt about this. But again, one additional plus, human resources. And because it is the people to do so. And as you all know, it's a major topic, brain drain issue. We lose talent. The energy industry also is an industry that requires so much talent and people. So HR issue that. Too many wishes. Sinan, what's your last wish? Last night, I would watch a program on the TV. Everything will be different after the elections. Until the elections, like, you know, we're so excited. We have actually last-minute solutions from Ankara until the elections. There is an election also in 2024, they told me. So it actually increased my heartbeat. I mean, my heart cannot tolerate it anymore. So free from the politics. I mean, to have state policies rather than government policies, let's say. And hopefully that's how we will get into our 100th anniversary with the good health. And I would like to thank to all the panelists and to all of you, and have a nice, good year.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you all. Thank you very much to all of you for your contribution, for your support, by the way.
Teşekkürler. Evet, IICEC'in bir sonraki konferans.
So, hope to see you again in the upcoming events of IICEC. After 7 days, we'll be getting into the new year, and with my best wishes for the new year to all of you. Thank you very much.